Hello, my name's EdwardMcGarry, and I'm going to be discussing the benefits of the use of Ritalin in the treatment of children with ADHD. The main use of Ritalin is to treat ADHD in children. It's been shown to improve productivity and behaviour. Methylphenidate is the chemical component in Ritalin. That's the chemical drug. It's been found to improve the working memory outside of the realm of ADHD as well, in groups who have suffered traumatic brain injuries. Side effects of Ritalin use can include headaches, anxiety, insomnia, abdominal pains. There's a few others. They've been known to be associated with the taking of Ritalin or methylphenidate. Treatments like neurofeedback, which I'll go into later, they've been shown to be less invasive with fewer side effects, and they can achieve greater results than the use of Ritalin or other drugs in the treatment of ADHD, but they do have their drawbacks as well. So overall, Ritalin can be shown to be an effective treatment in some cases, but it's not without fault. But we're coming to find that it's not the only option for ADHD treatment, which it has been. Not so much in the recent past, but definitely in the past it's been one of the more popular options for treatment of ADHD. So my first source is a study from Pelham et al., a few others. It's a peer-reviewed article and was published in the American Pediatrics Journal in 1999. So it explored the efficacy of Ritalin when compared to both a placebo and Adderall, which is another drug that's used to treat ADHD. So it compared the two drugs to one another as well as to a placebo when treating ADHD specifically in children. So Ritalin is an example of the methylphenidate, like I said before, whereas Adderall is the other chemical drug that's used to treat ADHD, and that's an amphetamine. So they're the two main drugs that are used to treat ADHD. There's a few different medications that each will have different names, but those will be the two subclasses of drug that are used to medically treat ADHD. Each of them work fairly similarly. They're stimulant drugs, and they target the central nervous system. They're used pretty widely today to treat ADHD today, since probably the early 2000s Adderall, and Ritalin's been used since before then as well. So this study really went into actually promoting Adderall as a viable replacement to Ritalin, and now obviously they're both used quite widely. The study's peer-reviewed and it's widely cited in other academic work. So that it helps the reliability of what it's saying. It helps you trust the source. But it is 20 years old as well. It's over 20 years old. So it might affect how transferable its findings are to today's world. The results of the study found that both types of the drug, so both Ritalin and Adderall, they produced improvements in the behavior and academic performance of the children being studied. So it helps to settle them down when you compare that to the effects of what the placebo did, which was not much in the study. So Adderall was even found to be slightly superior in the context of this trial due to its longer lasting effect. So the benefits of Adderall are it's slower to take effect on the body, but it can last up to 10 to 12 hours. It's a much longer lasting effect, whereas Ritalin will be a more immediate effect on the body, whereas that can wear out in around 4 to 6 hours. So in this study, the way it was run, Adderall was actually found to be slightly superior to Ritalin. As I go through here. It can be concluded from this trial that Ritalin is still a viable source for the treatment of ADHD in children, because the effects of Ritalin were still positive. It was a little bit, in the context of this trial, Adderall was found to be a little bit better. just due to the times that it was taken in, that sort of thing. So the second source, Magtello and a few of his colleagues, they released a research article through the University of Cambridge in 2017. So that one studied the effects of methylphenidate, and that's the active ingredient in Ritalin. So specifically this one, they didn't really touch the amphetamine of Adderall, but they studied the effects of it on working memory of individuals who had suffered the traumatic brain injuries. So this is where we can find that the effects of Ritalin can be extended to not just ADHD individuals, but also other individuals whose working memory network may not be as connected as sort of a normal individual may be. The working memory of someone who suffered from a traumatic brain injury is significantly impaired, and therefore the improvement in response to the treatment, so using Ritalin, it can be measured as to how much they improve in their working memory after Ritalin has, or any other methylphenidate has been taken. So data was taken through MRI scans, comparing the groups of people who had suffered a traumatic brain injury with healthy participants in a control group, which helps give you a point to measure to when comparing how much their working memory has improved after taking Ritalin. MRI scans are highly sensitive and a very reliable method of gathering information on brain activity. They're used in many trials to source sort of information on how our brain works and to read brainwaves and those sorts of things. It's important to remember that traumatic brain injuries are very variable. So one individual may have higher or lower brain function compared to another, who are both suffered traumatic brain injuries. So it's important to remember that there's high variability between individuals here, so it's difficult to compare them. Despite this, the brain function in the TBI groups was found to improve significantly after methylphenidate was treated to those individuals. It can be concluded from this study that Ritalin and other methylphenidate drugs can improve the working memory networks of individuals with impairments. So whether that's through traumatic brain injury, and we can probably take that across and say that it can improve the working memory of those individuals with other working memory impairments such as ADHD. So the final source for this assignment is Yan and their colleagues. This was another peer-reviewed article in the Journal of Medical and Biological Engineering in 2008. So this one discusses the use of neurofeedback instead of drug treatment for conditions like ADHD, as well as other conditions. In this article, we'll focus on ADHD for this one. So brain activity waves of individuals with ADHD, they're generally slower than normal. So in the frequency of their brain waves, they're generally a little bit slower, around the 14 Hertz mark, and are labeled as theta waves. And through neurofeedback, brain waves are sped up to match that of a more typical brain in the beta wave, so they're around the 11 to 12 Hertz mark, using electrodes that are attached to the side of an individual's head. So it's not as invasive as drug treatment. It's just through very sort of minor electrical impulses. They're designed to basically speed up the brain waves of an individual maybe with ADHD or another condition to match that of a more typical brain. Through the use of virtual reality, it goes through in this study. It's quite an interesting study. So it found through repeated sessions of neurofeedback, individuals were actually able to train their brainwaves into a more typical frequency and amplitude actually as well. So over time, as they've had several sort of these neurofeedback training sessions, I suppose, the brain is actually sort of trained to have a more typical frequency and amplitude over more extended periods of time, which sort of helps individuals focus in that ADHD sense, helps them focus on tasks, and works the same way as a drug treatment might do. So as I said, it's less invasive than a normal drug treatment, produces less side effects, according to this study, and similar ones completed since. So obviously this study was completed in 2008. It was one of the first studies into neurofeedback as a treatment for ADHD. But as time's gone on in the last sort of 15 years or so, neurofeedback's become a lot more popular and more widely used. So a lot more studies have gone into how neurofeedback can be used as a treatment for ADHD. It's also been shown to be an effective method for sustaining beneficial results regarding treatment. So, like I said, after an extended period of time, these brain waves can be sort of trained, and they will stay in that frequency of a more typical brain for a longer period of time, the more that they're trained through neurofeedback. So one drawback is that it is a pretty costly treatment. It is still today not quite widely as available as drugs like Ritalin or Adderall. So it's not always a viable replacement for those suffering from ADHD. ADHD and Ritalin are quite readily available, which makes them a lot more of a viable treatment for a lot of people. So evaluation of this evidence that we've got. So in terms of the use of Ritalin in children, we can say that it's definitely easily accessible. It's cheaper than a lot of the other treatments like neurofeedback. It's proven to be effective over a long period of time, and it improves the networking of your working memory, as we've seen in the second study. And like I said, yeah, it's extended use over previous clinical trials, over clinical use really. It's been widely commercially available for an extended period of time. It's a very well understood drug, which shows that we understand the drug, and although it does have some sort of side effects, we know that it's not a dangerous or deadly drug or anything like that. So those are some reasons why we can use Ritalin to treat ADHD in children. But some reasons against, obviously, it does have those side effects: insomnia, sore tummy, headaches, and those sorts of things. There's a few others as well. So effectiveness can be highly variable and short-lived. So like I said, over that sort of 4 to 6 hour period, generally people suffering from ADHD will have to take Ritalin 2 to 3 times a day in order to streamline their thoughts, basically. So there are other more effective treatments nowadays that exist, whether that be Adderall over extended periods of time, or even moving on to neurofeedback, which is that newer sort of treatment. Treatments like neurofeedback are actually becoming more and more integrated in the medical field, which means that they're becoming more easily accessible to those sorts of people. And going on, Ritalin actually, beyond those sort of side effects, has been known to cause withdrawal. So if you come off Ritalin too quickly, people can start to get withdrawals as their body becomes dependent on it. But that's a bit of the evaluation of the evidence that I've gathered. So to conclude, really, Ritalin is still widely regarded as a suitable treatment for ADHD in both children and in adults. Its benefits are significant, which is why the treatment's still been so popular, but the side effects, where they are present, can be uncomfortable, and withdrawals contribute to drawbacks of its use. Those are some reasons why Ritalin may not be quite as good. Newer treatments like neurofeedback will only continue to improve and become more available, which increases their viability in treatment of ADHD. Over time, they may even replace drug medications such as Adderall or Ritalin as the best option for treatment. But only time will tell that. If they become sort of more readily available and cheaper often as well, is a big factor in that too. But for now, medication still remains a very successful and viable option in treating ADHD in children and in adults, but improving their performance of their working memory too. So that is the plan that I have for today. These are the references that I've used. I think it was source 2 first, and source 1 and source 3. But yeah, thank you.